Hey, Jem here. I was born and raised on Gadigal land before moving to Meanjin with my family, where I spent most of my childhood and young adulthood. For most of my life, though, I've lived in Naarm, and this is where I consider my home to be. The traditional custodians on the land that I'm currently on in Melbourne, Victoria, are the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I also acknowledge First Nations people as the first teachers and leaders in this country.
You're listening to Eat the Principles with Jem Kolber.
I'm Jem Kolber, an experienced Victorian secondary school teacher and leader, and I think I might also want to be a school principal. As a way of getting principals, mainly women, some men, to mentor and develop me, I've created this podcast as a way of spending time with leaders I admire and unpacking what it is exactly that makes them good leaders. I, of course, intend on consuming these strengths and qualities and absorbing them into my own being to become the ultimate principal. And of course, share what I've learned with other aspiring leaders. Welcome everyone to the third episode of Eat the Principles. So as of yesterday, when I had a look on YouTube, we've got a total of 284 views from both the first and the second episode, which is about 283 more than what I was expecting. So really, I'm making this for myself, and if one other aspiring leader finds it useful, then that makes me happy. Thank you for listening, thank you for sharing, and thank you for recommending other principles I should chase down for this pod. Please continue to do so. I think I've got a list of basically 50 principles to interview. For our third episode today, I'm chatting with Nathan Chisholm. Welcome, Nathan.
Oh, good morning, Jem. Good to see you.
Likewise.
Good to see you.
So we know each other and we worked together for a number of years in an inner city high school in Melbourne. You came in as the principal of that school when I was just a teacher, and I think we worked together for about 5 years when you were in that role. And you were really important to me, and you still are, because you were the first principal to give me my substantive leadership role. That really taught me a lot about leadership. And so that's why I wanted you to be the first man principal that I have interviewed for my podcast. So, I mean, no pressure, but I also wanted the first man principal, or male principal, to be a really wonderful exemplar of what being a principal should be. And that's you, Nathan. And I can't tell you how many times I have Google mapped the commute from my house to your school. And every time the commute time just does not get lower. And I'm like, I'm a bit demoralised every time. And I haven't had enough Nathan Chisholm in my educational leadership life in recent times. So I'm just so happy to be spending this time with you today. Thank you.
You're so welcome. It's so good to see you. And it's an absolute pleasure to be with you. And I'm looking forward to chatting to you. So, as you said in the intro, I mean, 5 years together. If it's a little while ago, but that 5 years together was was such a great time. And when you asked me if I'd be happy to do this, it's an absolute privilege. So, and it's so lovely to see you. So I'm looking forward to chatting.
Great. All right. Well, let's get started with a finish these sentences exercise.
Sure.
So, I'm an executive principal at
Prahran High School.
And just because we haven't used that language of executive principal before,
Sure.
So we have principals and executive principals in Victoria. Could you just explain a little bit about the difference between the two and what they actually mean?
Yeah, of course. And I always feel like wanting to preface this by saying, like, the work that all principals do is complex and important. And the executive level or range, the department established a few years ago for essentially to give regional directors some flexibility with recruitment in school or communities that were considered to be a kind of bit more complex for a number of reasons, whether that's a demographic, whether it's a build, whether it's a school that has fallen sort of on hard times and needed a significant turnaround. But it essentially enabled regional directors to kind of label the schools, as it were, that requiring an exec print. It's a little bit extra money in some cases, but not always. So it means that we're employed a little differently, within the department. And that's the range that was set up. So there's also in the system, there's a number of schools where they have grouped a couple of schools together in areas where it's been a bit tricky, and have appointed an exec prin to kind of oversee and to support other principals in that space. So But for me here, the school where I'm at I think it was the build of this place has been complex. There's a number of things which we can talk about where my site is, where the school is, the fact there hadn't been a school here for a long time. The school was built off the kind of activism of parents rather than a precise sort of demand like it might be in a greenfield site. So a range of things that were considered to be pretty complex. So and that's kind of the executive level. I need to say too, I would have applied for this job regardless of it was because it was the job that sort of pulled me here rather than the range. But yeah, that's how it works.
Yep, gotcha. All right, thank you. Thanks for explaining. So, being an executive principal and a principal together, how long have you been a principal for?
So it's a long time now, Jem. So I've been a principal for 15 years.
And I was going to say 15.
Yeah, in 3 different settings. So all here in Melbourne. My school's in Melbourne, and so yes, 3 different settings. But it's been 15 years now. So. It's been a long time.
Yep. And prior to that, I was
a teacher, a proud, I'm a secondary school English teacher. I taught in country Victoria, here in Melbourne, and overseas for a little while. I also worked I took a year or so out, 2 years out actually, and worked in recruitment, and ended up managing a recruitment office in London, but it was still in the education kind of sector. But yeah, a proud teacher, and I still think, as a principal, even kids now say to you, what did you do before? I'm like, I'm a teacher, and I still teach. I teach a class.
I was going to say, you still teach now, don't you? You've got a Year 12 English class.
Yeah, I have a Year 12 English class. So yeah.
I love that. I love principals who teach. And Michelle Croft's my first guest on the first one. Yes. She also still teaches. And I think it's just really important for principals to still be in the classroom and have, even though you'd be busy and you probably don't have time to do it. But when I'm a principal...
Yeah, and the Year 12 English, as you well know, the Year 12 English load is huge. So it's been big, but it's also a lot of fun. And I really... it matters that we are still connected, we're still current, that our practice is current, which should be. And the other thing is, a bit more selfishly, it's a lot of fun. Some days you have things where I'm off to class now, and I'm with the youth, and it's a lot of fun. So
Yep, awesome. And so you came from an English teaching background. I assume you were assistant principal prior to getting a principal's job?
Yeah, good question. So in my first principalship, I was appointed there as assistant principal, and that was a school...
that was a P to 9 school, wasn't it?
It was, actually, Prep to 9. So I really... And I learned a lot there about... And I love being with younger children and watching, good practice of... And you can learn a lot about explicit instruction, about routine, about a whole range of things when you watch good practitioners with, as you know, with your own children now, but good practitioners with little kids. So that was a really nice experience. It was a pretty challenging leadership experience, I have to say. So the schools was a merge were in a pretty bad way, but I mean, I don't need to go into all the details, but it was a pretty tricky time, and so I was then acting principal after about 12 months. The principal moved on, and it was a bit of a baptism of fire. So it was a pretty tricky time, and but I learnt a lot about perhaps about what not to do, and when things go wrong, the type of leadership that's required to help turn things around, which I think we're going to talk a bit about today, about this idea about possibility and finding possibility in tricky times, or when it doesn't seem possible. And that was a pretty rugged learning experience for a few years, I have to say. But in the end, sometimes you have those experiences where in the end you're like, actually, well, I'm better for it. But in the moment was pretty tough for a while.
Yeah, wow. I'm a principal because...
Honestly, Jem, to make a difference, and to make a difference in the lives of young people. is why that's education for me more broadly. And I'm a principal because I've always thought I've always wanted to affect change. And there's been things about schools that I have thought needed to change. And so for me, the way to do that is to be in the big seat, and your best place to do that. So, and I'm also really motivated by the adult leadership piece as well as kids, as well as young people. But essentially, it's to make a difference.
Great. And one book that was pivotal to my journey as a principal is, let's introduce the book that we're going to chat about.
Yeah, great. So when you asked me this question, it's there's quite a few, and I need to say too, I read a bit, and educational leadership books I really like as well. But I really like. Sometimes I find more connection with leadership books that are coming from outside of our schools. So this book here, which you can see, is called The Art of Possibility, and it's a you've got one there too. So look, this was actually gifted to me by a colleague when I was in that first school. So it's quite old now. About 15 years ago, because she saw what we and I were trying to do, and so she introduced this book to me and gave it to me as a gift, and I loved it. And my leadership team at the time, we read it together, and it really helped me think about what we were trying to do at the school, and that is finding possibility where things seemed pretty dire. But also, I guess, spoke to me and as who I am as a person as well. I could try and treat people with respect, see the world as a place of possibility, valuing kindness, which this book talks about. I really like some ideas about this idea about leadership from any space, any chair, any direction, that you are a leader, I'm a leader, graduate teachers are leaders. So there's a lot about the book that really spoke to me. The book is written by, I guess the overarching metaphor is the conducting of an orchestra, which is who wrote the book.
So Benjamin Zander, so he's an orchestra conductor, and Rosamund Zander, who she passed away last year actually when I was doing some Googling about her.
They were married.
Yeah, they were married for a period of time.
Yeah, for a period of time. Yeah.
And she was an artist as well. So I think she was a landscape painter and also a therapist as well. So So
you've done your research.
I have, yes. Funny that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
A teacher being organised.
I know.
And so when I asked you what book you might choose, you gave me a few options, and I thought I'd go with this one. And so this is our third book in a row for this podcast where it is not about educational leadership. It's more general leadership.
Yes.
But I love it. Same as you, I really love kind of applying those kind of principles to the education world. And now when I did choose this one, you reminded me that in your office of that school where we first met, you had a canvas print of some of the key takeaways from this book, and it took me about a weekend, and I was just thinking about it, and then I could picture it in my mind. I could see it on the wall, but I have to admit, I don't know that I ever read it properly or that I ever took it in any way, shape or form. No. You know how art just becomes this thing that you don't even really look at on the wall? But obviously it was really important to you, and that's why you put that on the wall. So tell me, what were some of your key takeaways from this book?
And also that piece that was on my office was quite a basic canvas as well. So perhaps you weren't drawn to it because it wasn't quite as beautiful as basic.
You didn't make it, did you?
No, but someone else did. It was a gift.
Okay, gotcha.
So again, someone else from the previous school had made it.
Oh, lovely. That's really lovely.
Yeah, a couple of the key takeaways. So look, it's framed around a set of principles around leadership for leading people, but also it's kind of lessons for life, really. And while we say it's not educational leadership, he is an educator, or was an educator of an orchestra, so of the highest level people. And I guess what I like about this, one of the things is the message in this is to build a really high performance culture with very, very high performance people, the absolute experts in their field. You still can do that, and are best placed to do that when you actually really value the people. And when there are some principles that we sort of adhere to, whether we're talking about 13-year-old kids or, in this case, really high-level cellists. And some of those principles are around this idea of giving everyone an A, which
I like that chapter spoke to me.
Yeah, and that's not to say that we're all the same, but actually there's this principle of setting an expectation to become, to lean into that. So actually it says that I believe in you, and it can help us move. The book talks about moving from sort of a scarcity mindset or scarcity model to one of abundance. And without being too kind of philosophical, it does help us, and perhaps in school speak, to move out of the deficit model and actually look at strengths.
100%,
and when we talk about young people and older people like us, but we helping us move out of the deficit and actually look at building from what's working well can be really helpful. And another principle in the book which he talks really about is about leading from any chair. So again, it's that idea about that we're all leaders and to valuing everyone's contribution as a leader, and also be a contribution. What are you going to contribute to the organisation? And that's a question I try and build into selection processes as well. Is like, what will your unique contribution be? Like what because we're all going to contribute. Well, sorry. I hope that we all contribute. I hope that we all should contribute. But it's that idea about understanding that when you come to an organisation, we want you to contribute, because we value you. But also there's a commitment there from you and me as well to make sure that we do contribute and contribute positively. So I really like that. There's another message in there which is about rule number 6, which they talk about, there's a lovely story in there about what's rule number 6. And rule number 6 is not to take yourself too seriously. I always say to people, to my crew here, that what we do is the most important, noble, consequential work in the world, and it matters deeply. And it's important you have a laugh too, because and not to let ego get in the way, not to get too wrapped up in yourself in a way that not to take yourself too seriously. So you have to be able to have some fun too.
Yeah, and it sounds like the same chapters that spoke to you also spoke to me. I just went back through my dog-eared pages and highlighted a few bits and pieces as well. And I really liked that idea of focusing on people's strengths and not coming from that deficit model. And Benjamin in the book, he kind of talks about, I can't even remember what instrument this woman played. Yes. But he said, leaders can often look like they're completely disengaged or they're just not interested at all. But in actual fact, I think maybe he just hadn't listened to her or asked for her advice, or I don't know, or she just didn't feel like she could stand up and say anything. And I think maybe you and I are pretty similar in that way. We're really good at understanding character and looking at people and not focusing on their weaknesses or how difficult they might be. And in fact, as I've gotten older, I reject that idea that some staff are difficult. I don't think they are difficult. I think maybe someone just hasn't formed a connection with them. And so I'm really good at doing that, and I think you're really good at doing that as well.
I think and I think we have to be careful around, I agree, and look, when you've been doing, sometimes it's hard to believe that when you work with some challenging situations over the years. But I fundamentally don't believe that no one walks into a workplace and say, right, I'm going to do a terrible job today and make Jem's life a misery. Sometimes we can characterize things in that way, but I don't think that's what someone's intention is. So I guess that's something we talk about as leaders, and that you and I, there's a values connection, I think, for us that is, and leadership is about values. And sometimes, we're kind of going a bit of a tangent, but sometimes if you can see things in a workplace that perhaps that sort of run contrary to your values in a way, that can be tricky. But then you've got to have the skills to actually think, well, their experience is different. Maybe they haven't connected. Maybe there's all sorts of reasons. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And again,
then
if you think about the possibilities.
That's what I was going to bring it back to. So it's just about this idea of possibility. And so could you talk to me a little bit about like what you're thinking around like possibilities and how this can kind of help you when you're in your job?
So in and I guess to go back when I was first introduced to this book, we were fixing something that was in a really bad way. So like by every measure, the data was by every measure the school was not thriving, was not. So to actually, we needed people to see that there could be a brighter future. And so, I mean, I'm not suggesting that everyone was as invested in this book as I was, but we had to find some joy in the work. We had to see a brighter future, and it was, it's tough. That isn't the case in this setting where I am now, and wasn't the case when you and I worked together as well. Yeah. But there are times when we have to check this kind of deficit mentality and remind ourselves of the possibility, and remind ourselves of the opportunity. And in my context here, the complexity of this place has been the site is it's the smallest footprint in the state. And as I said, there's some other things about the nature of the demographic, the lack of state schools for a long time, all of these sorts of things. But there's some things we've had to flip on its head and say, we're not seeing those. We're seeing these things as strength. So, we don't have there's no oval here. People can't get their head around that. So I'm saying there is no oval, but there is a community facility up the road that links us to the community. And this is an inner city school. But we've got to see the possibilities, not just the things that we don't have. Because we have a beautiful school culture. Results are good. The place is flourishing. There are things that traditionally we don't have. But there is lots. Sorry, there are lots of things that we do have, and that's the possibility. Yeah.
Beautiful. And can you tell me about the leadership team that you did a little book club with? Like, what was your process for giving them this book to read?
So I bought it for them like as a gift, and this was a small team, and we read it. I think we met. I think we might have met weekly or fortnightly, I can't remember. And so we read it chapter to chapter. We came back and did a classic book club type discussion each week. But then we wanted to make some real, to actually build some actions into our school that kind of were informed by what we did. So we actually reframed our performance and development process for staff around this idea of getting an A and an A to lean into. It might seem a bit twee, but at the time it actually spoke to people a bit about saying we believe in you, even though lots of this place is in a pretty bad way, but people had to feel that belief. So, we had a book club, and then that also led us as a team to continue to read together. And I think that's really important now. And my current leadership team, last term we did book club together as a part of our and which was a book very much focused on learning and teaching. But I think it's hard to find time for professional reading.
Absolutely.
We're at work, you go home to your kids, you've got busy long hours, all of these sorts of things. So to actually say let's do a chapter a week and chat about it is something I think is something that can be really helpful.
No, that's great. And then I highly recommend creating your own podcast where you invite leaders to come on and talk about their favourite book. And then you've got a deadline and you have to read the book by that time.
Yes, you've got to read it,
So that's a lot. That's my motivation as well.
Well, and I suspect for my leadership team now, who I have the greatest respect for, they're an amazing bunch. And but also, if it gets to Tuesday and it gets to Monday, we've got our meeting on Tuesday, people are like, oh my God, I've got to read the chapter. But that accountability for all of us is, at least we're actually doing the reading.
Yeah.
I could talk about the book all day, but I think the main thing is that we pulled that really, those key principles and that overarching message that I think you and I share about belief and opportunity and possibility, and kindness and to know that that is actually a part of building a high performance culture. It's not, I said, it's not a happyology. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not youth group. It's not. It's
Yeah.
actually we want people to perform, and for people to perform at their best, we have to believe in them. We have to believe in them, trust them, value them, those sorts of things. So that for me is the key message.
Yeah, cool. And I wanted to tell you my favourite page, which I highlighted like that.
Yeah.
About how he encourages his musicians whenever they make a mistake, they have to throw their hands up in the air and say, "How fascinating!" And that mistakes can actually be wonderful. And I think in a culture of perfectionism, which is, a lot of leaders are perfectionists. I'm a control freak perfectionist, absolutely. I've got really high expectations for myself. And so I suppose that was I kept on coming back to that one page. I'm like, what was that phrase that he used to get them to say? Because everyone's going to make mistakes. No one's perfect.
Yeah.
And if we can look at them and recognise them and go, oh, that's amazing, I'm going to learn this from that, rather than coming at it from I really stuffed up, and next time I'm going to make sure I do this, this and this. So kind of that approach of positivity rather than negative.
It's funny that you mentioned that, and in the early days of this, one of my leading teachers, he was a terrific guy, and he really sort of embraced that in a funny, like, this is a bit ridiculous type of way. But again, it actually was because we were doing some really hard work, and it provided levity as well to say, it is a challenge, and you get curveballs, and sometimes you do need to go, wow, this is fascinating, but we have to work it through. So I think it's and it's that whole sense about you're not being flippant, excuse me, you're actually being human. I think, and so it's an interesting.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, let's get practical with my 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 protocol, which I've already given you. I've already given you these questions or these sentences, I suppose, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your responses. Okay, so 5 things in your office or desk or work bag that are crucial to doing your job.
This is some of these things are probably a bit banal, Jem, but I need my computer. In my bag, I need my computer. I need my healthy lunch and snacks because you need to eat and look after yourself. I drink a lot of water, so I need my water. I hate to say it, but I do need my phone. Everyone needs their phone. And I have a fidget ball, and I've had this for a long time since I worked in London many years ago. And it's funny, it has a slightly oddly sentimental value for me, but it is something that I fidget with as well. And for me, there's a bit of a well-being piece there that sometimes that comes with me all the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know Michelle has fidget stuff in her office as well.
Yeah.
Okay, 4 daily practices that make you a leader.
Yeah, I like that question around that make you a leader. So for me, it's around greeting my students and staff by name and greeting them any chance I get, and at the start of the day, and saying goodbye at the end of the day, and that sort of thing for me is really important.
Yeah.
I have a belief that no one necessarily needs to hear if I have had a bad day or think I've had a bad day. I think as a leader, you have to manage that in yourself, and not to do things always by yourself, but essentially it's incumbent on leaders to model the behaviours they want. And I have a belief that people don't need to know if I've had a tough phone call or I've had a bad day. You can do those things in different ways, but it shouldn't be something that comes across freely with staff. I think that's really important. Modeling my commitment to positive relationships. We talk about kindness and being positive with people. We talk about unconditional positive regard with young people. So I need to model that, and I try and do that. I think that makes me a leader. And look, being as present as I can in with people, and that's both being in classrooms, but also being present. So if someone says, have you got a minute? And that can be tricky sometimes because there's a lot of you've got a minute.
Yeah.
But
and you don't have infinite minutes.
You don't. But when you do say yes, you need to be present. And I try and do that with people to give them me and not tap away on a computer and be half listening and half typing. So I think that's important for me.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. All right. So being a principal is hard work. We know that. It's a demanding job. It requires all of your mental capacity on a day-to-day basis. And, research tells us that that principals' mental health isn't great in lots of situations. And, there are some really serious health concerns with principals' health and well-being. So what are 3 ways that you look after yourself?
Yeah. Look, it's important for me to be physically healthy, so I try and, I can make that as one point, Jem, I guess, in terms of, to go to, I'm not any great athlete, but to go to the gym and I play tennis and I have to commit to those things. And I commit to those things in my diary. So, if I play tennis at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday, that's not early, but I just, sometimes the day moves on and I need to prioritize that and say I'm done by 5:30 because I do that. So that's really important for me.
Yeah.
I have to switch. I never switch off really, but I don't work on a Saturday. And I've I guess I was just saying that almost with a caveat, but I don't work on, and I try and keep that sacred because there has to be a day for me when I don't do anything. And then spending time with my husband and doing the things that prioritising that, making sure we're going out for dinner with friends, like social stuff that, because it can be all consuming. It is all consuming, and that's hard on partners, husbands, loved ones, your little children. So we have to manage, I have to manage that to make sure that we're present at home as well and to go out for dinner and do all those sorts of things, because it can be pretty easy to be wrapped up in this so much that you're here every night of the week and all those sorts of things. So I have to manage my time.
Yeah, for sure. And Dr. Bryony Scott, who was on my previous episode, she talks about schools being insatiable beasts.
I agree.
You could very well give your whole life 24/7 to a school.
And the more richer, the richer and more opportunities you provide at school. And then you've got music one night, and you've got information out the next. Last night you've got cyber safety. All of these kind of opportunities that you offer the community and to our young people. And for me, I feel it's necessary to be, and I want to be there. But it's important, and the community value that. But there are times where you go, we can't do everything, and certainly in bigger secondary schools than this, and perhaps like where we work together, there are times when it could be 3 nights a week when you're there, and that's the job, but it takes a toll, so you have to manage it.
Yeah, totally. All right, so we have a teacher shortage at the moment, worldwide, and in Australia and in Victoria. It's really hard to get teachers, and there's a principal shortage as well. And so, principal jobs, where even teaching jobs as well, where you used to get a huge amount of applicants, we're not getting very many applicants for these kind of jobs anymore. So what are 2 reasons that I or any other aspiring leaders should become a principal? Why should we do it?
Yeah, so because it's hugely consequential, and your impact is far-ranging, and we have to believe that and remember that it really truly matters. So it matters and it's consequential. So it's doing something good. So that's important. The other piece, I made a note about this. It's a joy, in brackets, most of the time, and that's the thing. It is hard, it's stressful, it's long, it's complex. Sometimes it feels thankless, sometimes it feels lonely. All of those things are true of leadership, but it also is a joy, lots of the time as well. And you need to find that joy. And if we forget that, then you won't love the job. But I don't think you would. So yeah, it's consequential, it matters, and it actually can be very joyful. And the other thing, Jem, is we just need good people who believe that first point about it being consequential and to actually step up and go, there's a lot of, we know about what we read in the paper, we know about the statistics, all of those things. So, am I willing to step up and have a go? I hope that when the time is right, because timing is everything, and certainly with little kids. But, you'd be fantastic, so when the time is right, I hope you're willing to step up and have a go.
Thank you. Oh, thanks, Nathan. So we've got the one that we're down to, which is all about a key leadership quality. And I just want to tell you that I helped coordinate a middle leaders event for women recently, where I met two of your middle leaders at your school.
Yes, I did hear that.
And I didn't tell them that I knew you and that I worked with you. And I said, Nathan's principal there. What's he like there? I mean, not that I was trying to get some goss on you or anything like that. Yeah. But without hesitation, both of them were like, he is great. And I said, because I knew this was coming up and I knew I was going to ask you about a leadership quality. And so I wanted to find out from people who work with you now, what they believe, a key leadership quality that you embody. And so they had some really lovely positive feedback around how approachable you are and how flexible you are. And when I think of you and the time that we spent together, the word that comes to mind is open, that you're open to people and you're open to ideas. And I think you're also a really good read of character. So before I could verbalize my strengths as a leader, you told me that one of my strengths is my emotional intelligence. And I've remembered that, and I will remember that forever. And I'm really proud of that. And you could name that in me before I could see it in myself. But I want to know what you think. So what do you think is one key leadership quality that you embody that allows you to do your job well? And
what you've said is very kind. Thank you. And look, I guess I identify in myself an understanding of people that I think enables me to do my job. And the other word that I've talked about is about being trusting. I come from a position of trust in people, and you characterize it perhaps as openness, or but I think that enables me to lead people hopefully effectively, but we've got to trust in people. And so that, for me, that's I've written more notes, but the point, in terms of this protocol, it's 1 point. So I think it's an ability.
I know there's a million you could choose,
but it's about trusting people. I think it's this kind of openness and willingness and commitment to trusting people, to trusting the people I lead.
I love that. And what's really interesting is that it's not about trusting you and you being reliable. It's about you having faith and trusting the people that you work with. Oh my God, Nathan, I love that. So, and from each of my principals, you've all chosen different qualities. So Michelle Crofts chose flexibility, Dr. Bryony Scott chose humility, and then you've chosen trusting. So I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's and you could actually look at that, Jem, if we were all together. I think there's a through line through that that is about people, is about valuing people. It's an understanding that people are different, because that takes humility, that takes flexibility. You can't be flexible. Michelle can't be really flexible if she doesn't trust that if she's making a quick change for you, she knows it's going to be fine. So there's a real people-ness, I think, to that through line that's really interesting. That the three people we've spoken to are sort of saying we've got to believe in our people and not take ourselves too seriously. Rule number 6. Rule number 6. So that's really interesting. So it's been such a Such a pleasure to talk to you. It's been lovely.
Likewise. Just
Yeah.
allow me to be a little bit silly
Please.
before we say goodbye, all right?
Sure.
Because you remember what I'm like. I like finding
do.
joy and what's
Yes,
funny
absolutely,
in
yes.
the workplace. So I'm going to take that leadership quality of trusting and I'm going to munch on it right now and absorb it into my own being to help me in my journey to become the ultimate principal.
Great.
Thank you so much for your time today, Nathan. I really appreciate it. I've loved spending this time with you, and I might just go and Google Map the commute to your school. I know you've got a couple of jobs out at the moment too. By the time this is released, they'll probably have closed, but if they haven't, I encourage everyone to apply for those jobs because I would work with you in a second if you were the local high school down the road from me.
Likewise, and so we don't. I mean, you know, your viewers and listeners don't need to see a mutual admiration, but you know, it's been. But you know, but it's so like when you work with people who you connect with, and who you connect with, and you know, so I remember our time together really fondly, and so when you wrote about this, it's just great to when you know we don't work together anymore, but it's so nice to be connected and to talk about leadership and to hear how you're going, and and for paths to cross, and you know, and they will again at some point. So it's been great.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jem.
So much,
Happy
Nathan.
munching.
Yeah. Thank you.
See you.
See ya.
Bye.
That was Eat the Principles with Jem Kolber.